I realized that a lot of it wasn't about learning. It was about learning how to pass a test.
For the first 3 months, I probably contributed close to 0.
I feel like I almost exploited them rather than them exploiting me, because I got so much free mentorship. Like, I didn't pay them for all that mentorship that I got.
Today, I am joined by Madison Kanna. This is actually one I've really been looking forward to. I had several community members. In fact, even one of the employees here at Boot Dev was like, you got to get Madison on the pod. So we've been talking in Twitter DMs. It's finally happened. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I just realized we're kind of matching because your background is green and my shirt is green.
If we green screen everything out, it'll turn out a little bit weird. So
yeah, it seems like we coordinated kind of.
Well, this is fun. So you have been a developer for, we'll get into the story, 6 or 7 years. You've done a ton of stuff on the community side of things. You've got Code Book Club, Learn Out Loud. We're going to talk about those. You've been a speaker at conferences. You've been on panels, which is kind of crazy. Like, for only having been writing code professionally for 6 or 7 years, it's really cool that you've been able to get out and do all this community stuff. So I thought it'd be really fun to maybe just start at the beginning. Could you tell us what made you want to learn to code in the first place?
I had dropped out of college and I was visiting my big sister, Randall, as she moved to San Francisco and started working as a developer. So I went to visit her at her office. This is a while back now. Her team, they're building a music application. And I remember sitting down with all of the developers and just seeing them create something from nothing was so exciting to me. And just Silicon Valley in particular, I thought it was just incredibly exciting. And looking at coding at the time, I didn't understand any of it, but I really wanted to learn. So I decided to basically dedicate myself to learning how to code.
Wait, sorry, did you say you dropped out?
Yes.
So did you drop out because you went to San Francisco and saw how cool this coding thing was? Or was it like you dropped out and then you went and saw it and you were like, this could be for me?
I actually dropped out before then because I was in college and I just didn't feel like I was learning real world skills. So I decided to pause college for a while and try to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life instead of just going to college just to go. And then I figured I could go back to college if I felt really held back later in my life. And I ended up not going back. I don't think I will at this point. I don't feel like a degree has been super useful. Yeah.
Well, once you have even just a year of developer experience on your resume at that point, you've kind of opened the floodgates to other jobs. If you're going to get a degree, which as we all know, it's not something that's required, but if you are, it's probably most useful before you have any experience.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think a computer science degree seems interesting, but there's just so many amazing online resources now and, places you can go like boot.dev that you can do while you're working full time,
Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah, super excited that you're doing some stuff on Boot Dev now. Okay, so you went to San Francisco, your sister's building this music app, you just dropped out of college. What degree was it that you had decided, I'm not learning real world skills at the moment, or were you still just doing generals?
I was just doing generals. I wasn't there for very long. I actually, in my entire life, I've done very little school. I was homeschooled growing up, dropped out of college in the first year and a half, so pretty quickly. So I basically have very little experience with any sort of traditional schooling.
So college was kind of your intro to traditional schooling almost.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I was homeschooled growing up, now homeschooling is becoming more cool. But when I was growing up, homeschoolers were considered complete freaks. I had adults being like, are you okay? You're not going to be able to succeed in life. You're going to have so many knowledge gaps. You're treated as kind of a weirdo when you're homeschooled. But it was interesting because right before I was going to college, I had, obviously my parents homeschooled me and I had tutors and things like that. But long story short, I had, cousins or aunts or whatever and other adults in my life who disapproved of homeschooling a little bit. They were saying that when you go to college, you'll finally get that education, right? Homeschooled to college, you'll get that real learning in. And then when I got to college, I realized that a lot of it wasn't about learning. It was about learning how to pass a test or learning how to BS your professor. And I didn't feel like I was actually building that many projects. And I didn't really feel like it was real learning. There's that amazing Paul Graham essay where he talks about when you're in school.
I was going to say, you're going to bring up Paul Graham. Yes. Okay, sorry, go on.
But you knew it was coming, right? That essay really deeply resonated with me because I think a lot of people weren't homeschooled. And when you're a homeschooler and you read that and you just people have been making comments your whole life about how weird you are and you're trying to explain what it's like. You read that and you just feel so justified. But, he talks about how you have to decide between learning and passing a test when you're in school, right? To say that I did well on an exam is not to say you mastered the subject. That's a completely different thing. And so college just really bothered me, and I dropped out, and a bunch of people, like my ex-boyfriend at the time, was like, you're never going to be successful now. You're never going to, make money. There's like that stat that people who drop out of college on average earn $1 million less, which is all just like not true, necessarily, like correlation versus causation. But long story short, dropped out.
That's pretty cool. It takes a lot of guts to do that, to drop out for what I would consider to be like success reasons rather than failure reasons, right? Like there's dropping out because like you failed all your classes, and there's those dropping out because it's like, I'm not learning here. I could do better things with my time, which of course it sounds like for you was the latter. I actually am not sure if I've read the essay that you've read, but in my mind, I'm thinking of, I'm sure he's talked on this subject a lot. There's a talk that he gave where he's talking about like starting companies. And he says that he's seen a lot of college graduates come through Y Combinator, which is the startup accelerator that he founded. Basically, a lot of people from, Stanford is right there in the area, who graduate, come to Y Combinator, and they do the things that served them well in school, which is like give the perfect pitch to investors, for example. We've kind of been trained for 22 years of our lives to get really good at passing tests, to get really good at convincing people that we have the answers or know the answers or whatever. And those skills can even get you investor money sometimes, but they don't actually help you build the business later. And so he talks about how he has to constantly help new founders like rewire their brains so they're not in school mode anymore when they hit the ground running and start building real world companies. And so it's kind of cool that you had that, or kind of a similar insight, at least it sounds like, while you were still in your undergrad. Yeah,
you do make a good point though. I think on the other side of it, maybe you learn how to BS a little bit, like you said, like how the way you're talking to investors. Yeah, my BSing skills are not great, I guess. It's maybe the one drawback.
The good news is if you do go start a startup, in my opinion, like securing investment is a lot easier than actually building a successful company. So like if you actually have good skills, that's the harder thing to do than learning how to get good at BSing. I think you could take a crash course in bullshit investor pitches and be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too. For some reason, raising money has never interested in me. And I know for obviously deep tech, or depending on your idea, you really need investors, but I'm trying to just work on various projects that like actually make money before I have to take money from anyone else. You know what I mean? I don't know. I have like a adverse reaction to that sometimes.
At the moment, I think bootstrapping has become kind of more cool again, almost because of interest rates. Like in 2020, it was like, you're crazy. Why are you not raising money? Like money's so cheap. Money's practically free. You sneeze, you accidentally say the word JavaScript, someone will give you $10 million to start a company. These days, money is very expensive and actually is pretty hard to raise capital. And so I think bootstrapping has become cool again. But I mean, I'm with you. Boot Dev started out fully bootstrapped. I did raise like a tiny amount of angel investing about 3 years ago, but still haven't done like anything past what you would consider to be like an angel round. We've basically been profitable the whole time, and I think it's the way to go if you can do it, because you get to, there's a lot of things. You get to retain control of the company. You don't have to like grow to a certain amount before your investors are satisfied, which is pretty cool because you can get pushed into doing some really weird things. But anyways, enough about that. I want to get back to your story. So you went to Silicon Valley, saw your sister doing this stuff. Where did you start? How did you start learning to code at that point?
I definitely had help from my sister, but I started with basically moving in with my parents because, financially wise, not working or anything like that. And then I pretty much resolved to kind of lock myself in my room and jump into resources. The first thing I did was figuring out what I was interested in the most. Full stack, front end, what did I want to code exactly, mobile apps, things like that. So I had a kind of a exploratory period for a while, and then eventually took some front end course, got into front end development, kind of studied for about like a year and a half, maybe a little less than a year and a half.
Do you want to tell us what course that was?
I'm trying to remember I think it was a Udacity course. It was like some free front end course where they have you build a little project, and yeah.
Like a video course, follow along.
Yeah, like a follow along, build a project, like real easy, but one of those courses that's really, magical because it gets you into it and then you go from there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And you said that was a period of about a year and a half that you were kind of self-studying, building some front-end stuff. When the year and a half is up, like, did you find your first role? What happened next?
I did. Yeah. I found my first role. Whenever I tell people the story of how I found it, it's kind of controversial. People get mad. People get really mad at me. But I basically created my first role because, when you're as like people that or maybe students of boot.dev know, there's kind of this catch-22 when you want to get your first job and people are like, okay, but you need experience for this junior job. And you're like, I can get this experience, but if you give me the job, like, what do you do? So it's this kind of catch-22. So I basically was researching different startups that seemed interesting. And I was looking for startups that were growing and really needed people. And then I basically emailed, I forget how many, maybe like 7 or 10 different startups, and pitched myself on working for free for about 3 months. And then I said, you could promote me and pay me after that period if you liked my work in exchange for a mentorship. But people get really mad when I talk about it because I basically pitched myself to work for free for a period of time, which everyone's like, don't tell people to work for free and exploit them. And I'm just like, I'm not telling you to work for free. I'm telling myself to work for free because I was scrappy and I really wanted to dive into experience. I was like, I can spend a year applying to jobs and going through interview prep and having no experience, or I can dive into some sort of apprenticeship for a little bit and prove myself. And that's what I did.
I love this topic. You're right. It is controversial, which is why I think it's fun to talk about. I'm not scared of getting myself in a little bit of hot water.
Me either. Yeah. This is just the beginning.
Yeah. But like, it needs to be talked about because, okay, the first thing I'll say is I feel like back in 2020, by the way, was this like around that time? Was this around 2019, 2020?
It was before that. I think a couple years before. I feel like I've lost all concept of time. I don't remember the first year. It was a bit before that. Yeah.
Very cool. That just helps us get a frame of reference. But to fast forward a little bit, my perception was in 2020 and 2021 was kind of like peak, not okay to say that kind of stuff. Partially because the market was so good at that time. It was kind of the easiest time to get a job as a developer. Felt like money was free. Every tech company was making money hand over fist due to like everyone being home from COVID. Everyone's working from home. All those kinds of tailwinds to the developer market. It seems to me like talking about that kind of stuff, like unpaid internships or whatever, has been less problematic in recent years just because so many people have been laid off and are like doing anything that they can to get work, right? And so essentially like people are willing to take more drastic measures to find something. As an employer, I would never hire anyone unpaid. My very first job as a developer, I really appreciate. I made $15 an hour, which like, you look at that and you're like, that is, peanuts. That's nothing. But like, I fucking loved that job. I was there for just a year. I gained a ton of experience. I learned a lot. I wasn't unpaid, but it was, it was like a little over minimum wage. And it was really good for me. Before we discuss more, I want to hear your story. So did you end up actually working for free for 3 months and then getting hired?
Yeah, I talked to a couple of the startups. And then one of them I really loved. I'm still friends with them today. I ended up working there for 3 months. And then right when the 3 months were over, or it was actually a little before that, I remember. It was like before the contract that I kind of had created with them was over, they kind of brought me on into a paid full-time position. And I still really, as a junior developer, you're not that productive right away, right? So I still had a lot to learn, but I think that I had shown that I was scrappy, I was willing to jump in and work hard. And so they brought me on.
That's super cool. I can just speak from my experience. At my job, again, that one where I was making like $15 an hour, for the first 3 months, I probably contributed close to zero, right? To like the actual productivity of the team. Luckily, of course, the like seniors that were there who actually like weren't even really programmers, they were like electrical engineers. It was kind of a weird situation, but they really helped me out and like got me going. And I was able to start contributing after like really contributing after a few months. If you're working for free, again, not that I'm like saying that you need to or that you even should, but I think it's hard to say that like a company is exploiting a developer for like a couple months because genuinely a junior dev for like their first couple months probably aren't contributing all that much in a lot of companies. Unless it's just like they bring you on to like get them coffee and shit. Yeah, that could be like maybe exploitation, right? If they're not like teaching you and mentoring you and actually helping you.
Yeah, I was remote and I feel like I exploited them. I probably shouldn't say that. It's a joke. But I feel like I exploited them because they gave me so much mentorship and all of the senior developers, like I was so excited about coding and I was so like I had no idea what I was doing. I was so green. But I think all that excitement, just working with the senior developers, they were more than happy to jump on a call with me for 2 hours on a random Tuesday and explain parts of the code base. And like, I don't know when I could have maybe searched more for some junior developer job, but would I have gotten amazing mentorship in that job? Like, you kind of take what you can get sometimes with your first job. I feel like I got really lucky, and I feel like I almost exploited them rather than them exploiting me, because I got so much free mentorship. Like, I didn't pay them for all that mentorship that I got. So I feel really lucky and really glad I did that.
Here's the one thing I will say. If you've been trying to get a job and you haven't got one, and you get offered an unpaid internship, again, I'm not like recommending this, but if you do take the unpaid internship, if you do take the unpaid internship, now you're doing what you would have done anyway, which is continue practicing. You do have the benefit of like having additional resources now. Hopefully, I probably wouldn't take one unless there was like some senior devs that could kind of take you under their wing and help you. But like, you can quit anytime. You could just keep looking for a paid job while you're in the unpaid internship. That's what I would do personally. I would probably take the unpaid internship, and then like maybe 5 weeks in, I find a paid job and I just switch. I would have no guilt personally doing that. It's like, well, you're not paying me, like, I'm just gonna go over to this company that'll pay me. I don't know, that's how I'd kind of think about it.
And the experience is game changing, because I noticed when I applied for a couple of jobs right before I pitched myself to people, and of course you just don't hear back at all, like what is really setting you apart. Like, it's very hard just cold applying and things like that, and I had no network or following at all at that point, really. Like, my sister a little bit, but I had moved away from San Francisco, and I was kind of remote at the time. But long story short, once I had even like 5 months of actual experience on my resume, I started hearing from a bunch of recruiters. So it's so interesting that once you get a little bit of experience, it does seem like you hear a lot more from recruiters and things like that, even if it's only 6 months.
Literally any experience on your resume makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill Kennedy, founder of Arden Labs, he was on the podcast like 50 episodes ago, and he had a really good thing to say about this, in my opinion, which is like, if you have no experience and you're running into this wall of essentially junior jobs that are requiring at least like 1 or 2 years of experience, go talk to nonprofits and just ask them if they have any problems, right? Charities, nonprofits, ask them if they have any digital problems that you can just solve for them. Just turn that into your personal project, list it on your resume as experience.
Yeah.
Just go solve a real problem for a real org, put it on your resume as experience, and you can kind of cheat your way into, 6 months or a year of experience by taking some kind of, alternate approach.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If you're against like working for free for a company that makes money, then, a nonprofit, or looking into like, your local shelter or whatever you want to do. Definitely. Gotta get creative with it for sure, especially today when it is harder to get a job, like you said.
And just to reiterate, I personally won't hire anyone for free. I'm personally opposed as an employee, but I'm not philosophically opposed to it happening out in the world. I just don't want to do it. But what I will say is, as someone who's like managed teams and stuff, when you do hire a junior developer, and it does depend on the company, some companies you can kind of get value out of a junior developer much quicker. In fact, I'd argue that BootDev is one of those companies, because we have a lot of like little tasks that we can give to like the new developers that we bring on that don't require like full knowledge of the entire code base. But there's a lot of companies where like that's just not true. Like, it does take a long time to become onboarded and become useful. And so when companies hire juniors, they're taking this big risk and investment in you. We're going to bring you on, we're going to train you up for 3 to 6 months, and only then are we really going to hope to retain you and like get good value out of you as an employee going forward. Whereas like that's never true at the kinds of jobs that I worked before I was a developer. Like, if you were a bank teller, or I should say when I started as a bank teller, like I was providing value like third day. It was like 2 days of training, and then I'm just like hitting the ground running. Same with like when I was working as a server at a restaurant. It's like you're immediately providing value. That's just like not true of a lot of brand new software engineers, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that ramp up time, and there's that risk for sure.
That's fascinating. All right, so you went to this company, you were unpaid for a bit, then you came on paid. How long did you stay there?
I think I stayed there for about a year, because once I had experience, I remember I jumped to some new job that had a much higher salary, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, more money. But I kind of wish I had stayed longer, because that was my first job, and the mentorship was so amazing, and like long calls. And if I wanted to work with one of the senior developers, like they gave me a lot of mentorship and flexibility and things like that. And I kind of assumed, since that was my first developer job, I assumed, oh, this is how all senior developers just love to mentor, and they love to get on a call with you for 45 minutes out of their day and help you through something. And so I took this higher paying job, because like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna make 6 figures now. And I took it, and it was fine, but just it was not that same mentorship level. And so I was kind of stuck on my own working remote a lot more. And I kind of kicked myself later, like, oh, I didn't realize how good I had it getting that mentorship with senior developers. Like, you don't realize how good things are until they're gone or whatever.
Yeah. How long were you at that first company, the one where you had the good mentorship before you kind of jumped ship?
I think it was like a year.
Yeah, that's same with me, basically.
Oh yeah, the $15 one. Yeah, that you were talking about. Sounds like a good
I was there
gig,
for about
though.
a year, and then I hopped over to another company. My second company was really good as well. In fact, I would say I honestly probably had better mentorship at my second company, just because I was working with software engineers, whereas at my first company, I loved everybody I worked with, but they weren't software engineers. It was primarily like electrical engineers and mechanical engineers. It was a very interesting product that had like a very small software component.
That is really cool that you got to work with different types of engineers, though. I mean, how many of us have the chance to do that? That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was like my projects at that company were honestly pretty strange. And the fact that they were strange, I think actually helped me get my second job. Like my first project, I was building software for a Raspberry Pi that was like hooked up to all these like custom built sensors and building little wire protocols to make sure that they could all, because they were like custom built sensors. And so like, anyways, the Raspberry Pi needed to interface with all of them and kind of collect the data. Tons of fun.
Sounds really fun.
At least from like a web development perspective, not the best learning experience, although a great learning experience if you're into like sensors and things like that.
That's so cool.
Okay, so the second job, like you didn't get quite as good the mentorship, the pay was better, which is always great. Were you there for a long time, or have you had like a career where you've been kind of hopping around?
I was only there for about a year, but I've had other roles that have been 2 or 3 years now.
Would you say your career has been primarily kind of what you started in, which was like, I'm assuming JavaScript front end, maybe Node.js full stack, or have you been playing around with other technologies?
I played around at time. I had like a stint doing like WordPress development for a while. And PHP and things like that briefly. But then, kind of coming back to like Node, React, now TypeScript and things like that, which I really enjoyed. Like I always really enjoyed React and stuff like that. And then, worked for a team lead for a long while, which I kind of accidentally stumbled into. I didn't elect to be a team lead. It just kind of happened, which was interesting. It's, very different than being a software developer, leading a team of developers. But a couple of different things like that.
Yeah, tell me about that. So like how many years of experience as a developer did you have when you started as a team lead?
I guess I had about 4. The team lead that I had quit because they were like, this job is giving me such burnout. The deadlines are insane. And they just quit. And there was only like 3 other developers left. And they were like, Madison, you're up. And I was like, oh, this will be great. Like I got it. And it was pretty rough, but I definitely learned a lot for sure. But eventually I really missed coding. And so I was able to switch back to just like full-time programming because I felt like
you weren't coding in that role, or were you not coding as much?
I was not coding as much. Yeah. I mean, maybe like 30% of the time.
What were you doing for 70%?
Oh my gosh. Meetings with product, creating tickets, everything. Oh my gosh. Like, waking up at 5 a.m. to work.
Holy shit.
I think it's quite common. I think that like 30 to 50% as a team lead is probably above average from what I've heard from friends.
I think it depends a lot on the company.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Was this a larger or a smaller company?
It was like medium, I guess.
In my experience, and obviously everyone's experience is different. Everyone is going to be a different type of team lead, different type of manager. I kind of got my first team lead role around 5 years in, and I would say I was like 85% coding, maybe like 10-15% managing. There was one company that I was at where I was not a team lead that I felt like the whole company it wasn't a massive company. It was like, maybe an engineering team of 60 or 70. My team was like 4 or 5 people. It was endless meetings. It was the least productive engineering organization I've ever been a part of. I wasn't even a team lead, and I was spending like 30% of my time in meetings. And my team lead, who I thought was awesome, he was spending more than 50% of his time, I think, in meetings and stuff. And I don't know. I just am very skeptical of the productivity when that's the case.
No, it's true. And I think I didn't realize that things were just set up kind of incorrectly because like I wasn't a team lead before. So I didn't realize like, oh, we need to change our processes. Like this is not right. There's a lot of things that we need to do like better here. But I think when you jump into it and everyone else, it's like the organization, this is what they've been doing so far. And you get a lot of pushback for trying to change things. So it can be quite challenging. And I know people can kind of burn out, and even still like they've worked really hard, but you can still kind of burn out a little bit from stuff like that. So it kind of depends a lot on the company and how the organization is set up for sure.
That's the saddest part to me is like, I know everyone's different, but in my life, I felt like I've felt most burned out in scenarios, not necessarily where I've been working the hardest or like the most hours, but where I've been working the most on stuff that was just bullshit. Just like pushing so hard and not making progress. Like that burns me out like nobody's business, which is again why like I was at this company where I just felt like nothing was actually moving forward. I was still just working like 40 hours a week, but like it just really hurt my my soul, I guess.
Yeah, that was very much the case for me as well. It felt like nothing was changing, deadline after deadline. It just felt like it didn't matter in some way. And so I was working hard, but then also, yeah, it just hurt my soul. It's funny because now I will work or study on the weekend and work really hard and not get burnt out at all. It's like you said, it depends on what you're working on and things like that.
Was this like a scrum team that you were leading?
Yeah.
Could have called it mile away. Just kidding.
Or some scrum, I guess. Yeah.
I kind of want to dig into this if you don't mind, because I think our listeners will find it fascinating. That 70% of your time that like you were a team lead over, it sounds like 2 or 3 engineers?
Yeah, we hired more, but basically it was a couple in the start and then we hired more. And yeah, it was just kind of a disaster. In hindsight, if I was put in that position again, I would do so many things differently. Like it was my first time working with a product manager. They would kind of just be like, you know, send you an epic or they send you a feature to build and kind of just be like, okay, we need this done in a month. And that's what the uppers above need this done 1 month from now. And I, at the time, just was kind of this pushover girl. This is a while back. I'm much more mean now, but I was kind of just like, sure, we can do it. Like, whatever. I didn't know any better. I had no training. I never looked into what being a team lead was like. I kind of watched my own team lead, but I think I didn't see the behind the scenes of this stuff. So I would kind of be like, sure, we can do it. And then race to this deadline that was unrealistic, like again and again. And looking back, I would have pushed back and had unpleasant conversations, assertively or aggressively said, there's no way our team has the capacity to do that, working like early mornings and late nights all the time. And then I got super burnt out and I was just like, I'm a bad software developer. This is the wrong career. Like somehow blaming it on myself.
That sounds awful. First of all, like it's so bad that that's kind of how things were passed down. I had Thorsten Ball on the podcast a couple months ago and we talked about the relationship between product manager and like engineering team lead and how product manager is able to come in and be like, hey, this feature is important. It should never be, this feature is important, I need it done in 3 weeks, unless that product manager is highly technical and is also like hybrid the team lead. Because my assumption is if they're not technical, they're like, they don't actually know how long it takes to implement that in the current system. Conversation in my mind should start with like, we need this done. How long do you think it will take, right? And then you start a discussion.
I mean, that is so true. I still have like PTSD from this manager being like, you know, you get a bug and they're like, this should take a day, right? Doesn't know the system at all. Not technical. Yeah. Oh, it should take a day. It's like a meme on X. And I don't mean to like beat up PMs or whatever because they're fantastic, but just in cases when
they can be fantastic. I don't know. There's some
not this
PMs,
one, but
okay.
It's like a meme that you see, but it actually is real, and it can be so incredibly hard for the developer to work with that.
Sometimes it is a one-line code change, but like finding the line takes like all day, right? Yeah, I totally get that. There's one job that I had where I felt like it was really inefficient. Most of the time, by my estimation, was wasted in lots of scheduled meetings. Now at Boot Dev, we have very, very few scheduled meetings, like recurring meetings to talk about what we're working on. We have like one a week for like 20 minutes. And it's just like a brief update. When I was on a Scrum team, it was like start of the sprint, had a meeting. Middle of the sprint grooming. We had backlog grooming 3/4 of the way through. We had like a retroactive when the sprint was done. Product manager always coming in to kind of like change priorities during the middle of the sprint. Is this the kind of stuff that contributed to you not being able to code for 70% of the time? Or was it also other stuff?
Yeah, mostly just everything you said.
Yeah, a lot of ceremonies. I get that. Yeah. Well, that's rough. 70% of my time not coding as like a brand new team lead would have driven me absolutely insane. So I'm glad that you left with your sanity intact.
Absolutely.
Is this about the time that you started Code Book Club, or is that later?
I actually started it before this. Yeah, because I was remote for a long time. I mean, I'm in San Francisco now, so it's different because it's like the center of so much tech is here. But I was remote, living a couple hours from San Francisco. And I started Code Book Club because I realized that I basically, as a developer, you always need to be learning. And I wanted to start reading different coding books and technical books that people had recommended. So I got together with a couple of my friends. We decided we were going to start doing this book club every week. And then the day it was supposed to start, they both were just like, I don't have time for this. And they both just dropped out. So I went on X, Twitter, and I posted and I was like, would anyone want to do this book club on Zoom with me every week? I had almost no one really following me much at the time, maybe like a few followers, but I got a really enormous response from so many people who were learning the same things as me. And I just thought it was so fantastic that you can kind of find your people online, find other people learning the same things as you, no matter where they are in the world. And so we kind of started this book club that just grew really huge. I think we have like 10,000 people in our Discord, 10,000 people on our mailing list, and we get new subscribers to that all the time. So I started it quite a long time ago, and it was really fun, especially for the accountability was a great aspect, because if you're joining a book club, you can always bail. But if you're hosting a book club, like you actually show up and do the reading.
Yeah, you got to actually do the reading. That reminds me of when I had Carson Gross on to talk about HTMX. I was like, shit, I got to actually like read his book before like the podcast starts.
I can imagine. Yeah. I was wondering that when I've seen you have some guests on and like assuming it's like probably a lot to read the various books and things, but it's great accountability aspect for actually doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a forcing function for sure. What's the cadence? First of all, are you still running the book club today?
Someone else runs it now because I'm working on a new community. So I think after 5 solid years, I paused on that one and tried like a new experiment. Yeah, it was a long time.
That's a long time. So how often did you finish a new book in the book club?
It depends, because if we did like a smaller JavaScript book or something, maybe that only takes a couple months. We went through cracking the coding interview and we added on live coding so you join a call every week and you discuss the chapter and you would hop into immediately solving the problem. So you could split up into twos or stay in as a group, and you'd basically share your screen and work on the problem, because we eventually realized that, just doing a book club and discussing wasn't as helpful. Like we really wanted to write code together. So the length of the book would be different. And then we did all sorts of things from there. We would do challenges. So like everyone builds an HTTP server all together this month, and then stay accountable and meet and discuss where you're blocked and things like that. So we've done like books and projects and lead coding.
I've read several coding books that are like code first. It's showing you tons and tons of code examples and like how-tos. And I imagine discussing those books pretty dry. You actually got to be writing code. And then other books that I've read are like very conceptual and like high level. And those ones I feel like would probably spawn greater discussion. That makes sense that you guys kind of pivoted into doing more workshop and stuff. What was your absolute favorite book that you guys read over the course of your 5 years hosting Code Book Club?
Oh my gosh. I loved cracking the coding interview. It was really pivotal for us because we had just been kind of discussing books and not doing much coding. And then we switched over to read the chapter, but then show up every Sunday prepared to code. Oftentimes we do this format where we pick one person to be writing the code. So I'm sharing my screen to write the code, but then the group kind of tells you what to do, which was really interesting because it wasn't fully coherent sometimes, right? It's like, which direction, what algorithm are we going to write? But I think that one, because it just grew my skills so much and we got a much higher retention rate. People started coming to the club more because there was more active coding. They felt like it helped their career a lot more. So that one was just a blast.
Was it like, so 10,000 people in the Discord. I'm guessing not 10,000 people on the Zoom calls, because that would be chaos.
Yeah. I wish that would have been amazing. No, we had at times up to 200 people on one Zoom call, and we'd have to break up into breakout rooms and have, 20 people in each room. And I would kind of go throughout and monitor and things like that. But, it kind of ebbed and flowed. And sometimes it wasn't that many people and things like that. It's always been a free community, which is a blessing, but it's also a curse because, when something's free, people don't really value it as much. People would start with the best of intentions. Like, I want to read this book. I want to code to help my career. And then they would kind of fall off because it is hard to wake up on a Sunday and jump on Zoom and be coding and practicing every weekend, right? So it's hard for people to stick to. There wasn't really skin in the game, right? Like if you miss the club, no one penalizes you. You're not, charged for it or anything like that. So we definitely had over time, like more members, and sometimes we didn't have that many. And there was like a core group of us just showing up and grinding through.
I love that phrase, skin in the game. So Boot Dev, we have a free Discord. Actually all the content on Boot Dev is free. The interactivity is paid. People who listen to this podcast kind of understand that. My point just being, when you have something that's fully free, you get a lot of drive-bys, right? You get a lot of people that join, like you said, stick around for 30 seconds and leave. When people are forced to pay an amount, even if it's low, there's some form of commitment there that I think you'll just get a higher level of commitment from everybody that's involved. There are some communities where, you know, lots of people that are joining for free and not sticking around, like it's not really a problem. You can kind of just like ignore it. I imagine in other communities, it actually creates active problems for the people that are trying to take it seriously. Did you run into any issues like that?
I think we had issues where people would fall off and things like that. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Not sure.
You know, for example, if you had a small 10 people and like, for example, you actually like gave out assignments to do stuff, I can imagine that could become problematic if people weren't really committed because like they just wouldn't do their part. Like, for example, like starting a group project with people. This is the worst. Like you start a group project with like 6 people and you actually want everyone, and I'm not saying you like need to have everyone pay to do a group project together, but like you want some level of commitment from them because it's really frustrating if you start doing your part and then you show up to the next meeting and nobody else has actually done their part, or, you know, 3 people that were supposed to didn't. And it actively causes problems for the people that are serious about it.
That is so true. I think there was some attempt at group projects one time, but it fell apart from people who didn't show up. So I think that we just didn't do that kind of thing because we knew.
Because you just knew it was going to happen. That makes sense. When you have 200 people, like...
Yeah, we just knew. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you ran it for a long time. Cracking the Coding Interview was your favorite book. How did you motivate yourself to just do this for free for 5 years? How much time did this actively take? I know you had it like a day job the whole time, but like how much time were you dedicating to this thing?
I'm not sure because it's kind of like we talked about earlier. If you really feel like what you're doing matters and you're loving it, then I had no problem waking up and trying to work on it on a Saturday, or, you know, Sundays was our meeting time and I was always excited to go to the club on Sundays. So I kind of lost track about how much I worked on it. I definitely in the end though started working on it less and started feeling a bit burnt out because, as you know, when you're leading a community and so much responsibility falls on you, and like I would wake up and I'm getting like 30 messages a day, but I'm getting tagged a bunch. So eventually I got different people who started running the club with me. My friend Dennis, Amanda, John, they're people today that are still in the club making it happen. And they all became like moderators, admins, like running the club just as much as me. So definitely adding in different creators of the club really helped and made me get a lot less like burnt out from trying to answer everything and just the influx of people who would always come in. So that definitely helps out. But I was always just really pretty excited about it.
And now fast forward, you're starting a new community. This one's called Learn Out Loud.
Yeah. I just launched it a few weeks ago, actually, in time for the new year.
Yeah, awesome. Where can people find it?
Actually, so we're closed right at the moment because with Code Book Club, it opened. Yeah, sorry, you can't join. No, I'm just kidding. With Code Book Club, it was like 1,000 people joined in the first 2 weeks, and I was absolutely overwhelmed, and we didn't even really know what the community would be. So this time we accepted a small amount of members. I think we have about 40 people, customers, because it's actually a paid private community, which I've never done before. But we're working on it as basically just small to figure out kind of like our first MVP. So it's closed currently, but it is on School, which I think is a really cool software that helps you run communities and add to Zoom. Discord just feels a little chaotic, and there's some things I don't like about Discord. So yeah, we're on School, closed right now, but we'll open up again later on this year once we've kind of worked out more of our features and things like that.
Is it just you doing it? Are you doing it with a partner or anybody else, or is this a Madison Kana solo project?
It's basically me, but I have some community leads. They're kind of helpers. So I do have like a small team, which is super exciting, that I'm kind of running.
Is the format going to be the same as Code Book Club? Like, is it a book club or is it something else?
Yeah, it's a lot different. So it's based around this idea of learning out loud, which is something that I've done on and off for a really long time, which is seems like a simple concept, but it's this idea of sharing your work. So sharing what you're learning, sharing what code you're writing, posting out on X or Substack, making videos, whatever you want to do. And people have been talking about this for a long time, but right now it's more important than ever because there's so much talk about AI and what will AI automate. And regardless of where you are on that spectrum, if you think that AI is going to automate developers or not automate developers, there is one thing that AI can never automate, which is being authentically you. So having a personal brand, knowing how to create an audience, sharing your journey. Of course, there'll be like AI, there's AI ladies out there on the internet, right? Things like that. But AI can't actually replicate that personal brand. Someone is following you, Lane, and they care about this podcast and they're invested in you and they want to listen to you and they want to buy your product and they trust you. And so Learn Out Loud is all about learning new things, right? Like everyone has an idea of what's the best new sexy skill that you need to learn so that AI doesn't replace you. Like it's AI or machine learning or backend, like whatever it is, learning that, but then also paired with learning out loud. So sharing your work and sharing your journey, the product, the code that you're writing, whatever it is you're creating, like making sure that you're sharing that and documenting it. And I think that's really a way to learn fast and also authentically build a personal brand that AI cannot replicate.
Is it fair to say that it's not necessarily like for a specific skill level of developer, but maybe more any developer that wants to, like you said, create a personal brand or become a creator, maybe on YouTube or Twitter? Is it more about the creative side that you guys are going to be collaborating about?
It's less about your specific learning goal, right? Like backend engineers only or front-end engineers only. Anyone can join, although we have noticed that most people are full stack and learning low level or full stack development or even some Math Academy folks joining us, a lot of them as well. So yeah, it's not so much what you're learning or the level, but more about documenting your journey. And you don't really have to go into it like, okay, I'm going to become a YouTube star or something, right? Because that can take so much effort, but it's more about that accountability. So in the community, you can choose, you can say you're going to be sharing with the community, you're learning updates and have accountability calls and Zooms and things like that, different events to make sure that you're on track with your learning goals. And then the other aspect of the learning part is the out loud part. So creating it and sharing. And some people are doing this they are really focused on growing their YouTube as well, but others are just posting little snippets on GitHub as a learning log. So it's kind of a variety of people depending on how much they want to create. But the main idea is really this positive feedback loop that you get from learning out loud. We're having people do different things. Like one of our members, he's basically learning a little bit from this coding program, and then he'll post his coding snippets on X. And then he's getting this positive feedback loop from all the other communities will go and like it and share feedback. And so usually social media is addicting in a bad way, right? Like it's designed to addict you. And all we're doing is doom scrolling. We're trying to take social media, and by posting only when you learn something and posting a snippet of what you learned, then you're inspired. You get all these like fake internet points that these giant social media companies have created. You get those fake points, but it's about your learning. And so you get in a positive feedback loop because you learn something new, then you share it. You get all these internet points from your friends, from the community, and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels so good. Like your brain is designed to be happy about that. And then you want to learn more and post more. So it's actually trying to make social media work for you rather than just going on social media and like doom scrolling all the time and not learning anything. It was a bit of a rant, but I got really excited.
No, it's cool. I mean, as you know, I am all about fake internet points. Big fan of fake internet points, XP, gems, chests. We're wired that way, right? And yeah. I like the point that you made. The distinction between all this stuff is wired for engagement. It's to get you to engage. And so the question is just like, what are you engaging with? And engaging with your Twitter feed, yeah, probably not the healthiest thing. Like very few people need more Twitter in their lives, more TikTok, more YouTube, whatever. Most people do need more learning, right? And more actual like high quality content. So yeah, that makes sense to me. You mentioned this like fear of AI as almost like a driving factor for, it sounds like, at least some of your community members. I want to understand kind of where that came from, whether it's an opinion that you have, or maybe it's something that you've been hearing stirring in your community. Like, would you say a good number of your community members are joining the community with that primary focus of like, okay, I actually need to, in your words, like kind of become authentically me such that I am replacement proof in the age of AI?
Probably not a huge amount, but there's definitely a significant portion of the community that realizes the power of an authentic personal brand as something that AI won't be able to replicate or take from you. And I think that is absolutely true, right? I think for the other aspect, I think you're just seeing right now a lot of fear and a lot of fear mongering over AI and the future of software development. And I think that it's taking a lot of hope away from people who are getting started learning how to code and they feel like they love coding, but they're not going to have a future in it anymore, which I think is quite sad. I definitely don't think that's going to happen. I think right now we're seeing as AI kind of seeps into into every field and it changes so much in the next 10 years. I think there's going to be so many jobs in coding, specifically like programming jobs, exploding as people want to use these AI tools. And I think that programmers will be the best at working with these AI tools because they understand like what's actually going on.
It's so hard to predict how a pretty big paradigm shift in technology will affect like the job landscape. To be clear, like I'm very much kind of in camp. Yeah, I don't think developer jobs are going anywhere. I am very much in camp. I think developer jobs will change. I think they have changed a lot. Like I look at my developer workflow today and compare it to 5 years ago. It's drastically different. I Google way less. I use ChatGPT way more. I have an inline code assistant. My workflow has changed a lot, even though if you kind of squint and step back, it looks very similar because I'm, clickety-clack writing code. In the 80s and 90s, writing software was writing code for 4 months, cutting a release, burning it to a disk, and like shipping it around the country on physical media, sometimes through the mail, sometimes in retail stores. The internet changed everything. I mean, obviously the internet created an insane number of jobs. And I think AI is just a very different paradigm shift. I don't know exactly what's going to change.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, I guess.
One thing that I'm curious about is in your personal developer workflow, what have you been able to use AI for that has made the biggest impact in like your productivity?
Oh yeah, it's probably when it comes to learning new things, specifically picking out a problem or some area that I want to learn about and then just, talking to an LLM has been incredibly helpful. Or when you're kind of stuck on a coding problem, like in my own personal time, I love just kind of getting like little hints to get unstuck, but not just being given the answer. I really love that kind of avenue of it. What about you?
Part of the interesting thing to me is I use it the same way you just described. Like I'm working on something and I'm like making queries to ChatGPT to like get myself unstuck or like get factual answers to like things that I'm not sure about. And to me, just because like I consider myself, senior developer, 10 years of experience, like I'm less worried about like hindering my learning at this point. And I'm more worried about just like getting stuff done productively. But from my perspective, I just can't use AI for a ton of the stuff that I do in a productive way. If the job is any more than just a few lines of code, I can't even get the AI to do anything useful for me. It'll generate a bunch of code and I have to like go digging for the part that I want and like put it into the project. The context window isn't big enough to fit all the files that I need the AI to know about to actually be able to give me something interesting. So like I'm sitting there using it over and over again for like little snippets to get little answers to things. Honestly, just feels like what Google used to be in my workflow, but like on steroids. Like I just use it that much more, but I'm still hands on keyboard, just like writing all my code. Not necessarily because I'm philosophically opposed to using an AI, but just like it's not that useful yet.
Yeah, no, same for me. Like when you asked me, like, how has it been most impactful for my work? I had to think about not when I'm working, but like, when I'm studying in my free time and it's some area I know nothing about, that is when it has been most impactful because I'm asking it questions. But when it comes to like actual day-to-day work, same thing. I've tried to use it before and it's just so much time going through and it doesn't understand, like kind of like a really bad junior developer, that it's not helpful. So I'm not really using it at all right now in my day job. I mean, there's some boilerplate stuff for sure. But like you said, if I'm trying to do anything a bit more complex, it gets really tricky and it just seems like it's wasting my time more. And maybe that'll change and that's amazing. But beyond like some boilerplate stuff or something that doesn't feel too complicated, I feel like I can use it for. Yeah, mostly just for learning and kind of asking it questions and things like that has been the most useful. If it's like completely new programming language or something and I'm trying to solve a problem in that programming language and I'm kind of stuck and then kind of getting a hint or asking it a question has made my learning faster, but not work so much as of now.
I feel like the conversation is not just bad in a lot of cases, but it's like so hard to have. I listen to like non-technical people on, marketing or business podcasts talk about AI and talking about how you can use it to write code. And I feel like a lot of times the discussion goes to a very simplistic place, which is like this benchmark came out and the AI codes at this like, crazy high level, like it's solving, like LEET code impossibles or whatever. Like these developers are cooked, kind of a thing. But where the real nuance of the discussion lies has more to do with like, when can I inject it into my actual workflow to make an impact in the things I have to get done every day? It's not always just this like really simple scale of the responses are low quality or the responses are high quality. It's more like it's good at like weird stuff and like bad at like what you would consider to be simple stuff. I'll give like a concrete example. It's really fucking good at leak code. Like it's like senior developer level good at leak code, like straight up. You give it a very specific one paragraph explanation of a problem, it can regurgitate a function that it read 73 times on Stack Overflow really well. And like, I wouldn't expect a junior developer to be able to do that. So like, it's very easy to say like to non-technical people, oh, it's better than a junior developer. But then at the same time, you give a junior developer a workspace with like 70 files of code and tell them to fix a problem. You give them a 3-sentence explanation of the problem, let them spin their wheels on it for 30 minutes. They'll find the problem, they'll fix it. With an LLM, you'd have to like write all these scripts to get all the context into the LLM, right? You have to give it capabilities to like grep and find through the project such that it could even find the problem in the first place. It's just not that simple in my experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's much harder in that way. Oh, I love Boot Dev's, what's its name? I was using that when I was going through Boot Dev.
Oh, Boots?
Yeah, it's great. Helpful.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
That's a great area where like if you're stuck, you can just type in and see what he says.
We've been very pleasantly surprised. I can maybe share some interesting statistics. Before GPT-4, we didn't have Boots on Boot Dev, of course, and people would like view solution a lot. One thing that's been really awesome is people now use Boots like 5 times more than they view solution. Boots is a way better way to learn what you're doing wrong than just looking at the solution, because he's been like pre-prompted to not just give you the answer. He'll like sit there and prod you and be like, hey, I think maybe there's something going on like line 5, or like you passed 4 parameters into this function. Is there a reason that you did that? I've been very pleasantly surprised, like you said, at how effective LLMs have been just for learning purposes, even when you can't quite get them to just like solve the problem for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I didn't know that he was designed that way to not give the answer. I haven't asked him for the answer, so that makes sense. Like I haven't been there yet where I'm like, give me the answer. It's great.
Yeah, specifically, he's supposed to kind of follow the Socratic method, which is basically like he's supposed to ask you questions. So the normal way you would typically work with an LLM is like you ask it a question and then it just like gives you the answer, or tries to give you like, usually it's like this crazy lengthy answer with tons of bullet points and shit. Yeah, with Boots, he's been pre-prompted to just ask you follow-up questions. You're like, hey, why isn't this working? He goes, well, why did you do this weird thing? You did this weird thing on this line. Why did you do that? And then you have to answer and be like, well, I did it because of this. And he's like, oh, like maybe there's like a flaw in your reasoning there. Like take a look at the instructions. It says this and you did this, which is how I would argue like a good mentor would usually help you like in a kind of live setting.
Yeah, I love that.
Madison, this has been a lot of fun. I feel like you've given us a lot to think about. I honestly feel kind of bad that I haven't written or I haven't read nearly as many books as you have. I've read like 4 programming books.
Yeah, that's shameful, Lane. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. No, it is. It makes me want to read some more. Do you have, so I know you mentioned cracking the coding interview. Could you leave us with like a short list of 2 or 3 more that you really like that you want readers to check out?
For sure. Although
or
I would
listeners
say,
to check out? Yeah.
I would say that I think one of my mistakes I made was reading too many books in the past and not coding enough. I've learned from this lesson, but so I wouldn't beat yourself up too much, because it's like very comfortable to stay in a book. So I kind of had to learn over the years to really force myself to write more code. But yeah, gosh, I love the book Code. I forgot the subtitle, but it's called Code. It starts out with, what is binary, ones and zeros, and it goes all the way up to the operating system. I think it's a great read. I also love this book. It's not as programmy, so I guess it's just a more general recommendation, but it's called Love and Math. And it's about a mathematician and his journey towards becoming a mathematician. It's such a great book. I also love this book called The Pattern on the Stone, and it's all about, what does it mean to be Turing complete? And it goes over just different ideas within programming in the fields of computer science. It's a beautiful book. I thought it was wonderful.
The Pattern on the Stone sounds like a novel. That's the most enticing title for a computer science book I've ever heard.
Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
That's really cool. Awesome. I'm gonna add those to my list. Can't make any promises that my list will ever get read, but they're going on my list. Cool. And then I just want you to take a second. I know we already talked about your new community, but just one last time, if you could plug everywhere that you want our listeners to find you, if they want to follow you and maybe join your community?
Yeah, sure. I would love that. And thanks so much for having me on, Lane. I mean, I listened to a bunch of episodes, so it was really great to talk to you. And yeah, you can find me on X at Madison Kana. And then Learn Out Loud is learnoutloud.com, but it's with a 0 for the O and out because learnoutloud.com was taken without it. So I just added a 0. And those are probably the two of the best places. Yeah. Oh, Code Book Club also has a X page as well, not an X page. What is it called? An X profile. Yeah.
Does Learn Out Loud redirect to Notion?
Yes, it redirects to Notion because I was like going to build a whole site for it, and then I was just like, no, I'm shipping too late if I built this whole site. I literally just put up a Notion for it, and it works out really well. We'll have a site eventually, cool. But yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I was on the right one because I typed it in and then I went to Notion. But this looks
what
right,
is happening?
So.
What is happening? Yeah, we just threw up a Notion. You know what? Just wanted to get it out there.
You need to get like learnoutloud.dev or something. That 0 is going to throw people.
I know. I've heard that recently. I think we might have to change it, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah. I've been through worse migrations. Okay, awesome. Go check out Madison. Check out Learn Out Loud. Thanks so much, Madison. Talk to you later.
Thank you.